If you guys hear scurrying around in this video, I got a puppy. She's adorable, but she's crazy. So I'm going to try to film this as quickly as possible. The Federal Reserve just met a couple of days ago. They chose, sorry, I keep monitoring her. They chose not to cut their FFR, their federal funds rate. Now, the funny thing is that when they started cutting their FFR back in September, the PCE core inflation, which is their preferred metric, was actually higher. It was at 2.7%. Now, it's at 2.6% at the most recent reading. So then the question becomes, is this politically motivated? Because if the inflation rate, PCE, was higher when they started to cut, why would they not cut now? That's exactly what we're going to talk about here today in this video. Hey everybody, welcome to my second channel where we talk about finance and economics, clearly in a much more relaxed setting. So in order to start, before we begin, I just want to use this as an opportunity to clarify something that I constantly hear misrepresented by even people who are well-versed in finance and economics. And that is that the Federal Reserve is a private institution. It is not. Okay, the reason why the Federal Reserve appears as such is because primarily for two main reasons. One, because it provides a dividend to member banks. That dividend is 6% per year because those member banks hold reserves in the Federal Reserve. So that seems fair. The second main reason is because it does not directly report to the US government. That means the executive branch or the legislative branch. Now, the reason for that is mostly so the government does not have direct control of the money supply, because that would be horrible. Every election cycle, we would have manipulation of the FFR. Hi, buddy. Want to come say hi? We would have manipulation of the FFR for political gain. Now, with that said, the Federal Reserve was created by an act of Congress, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. So it is absolutely a hybrid institution, but it is what's known as an independent governmental organization. And in fact, all its profits above the dividend, guess where they're sent to? They're sent to the US Treasury. So it is absolutely a governmental organization. It just acts with some independence. Okay, now let's actually talk about this. So there's this feud between Donald Trump and Jerome Powell, and it's kind of like a one-way feud. Trump wants Powell to cut interest rates. Why? Well, there's a couple of reasons that have been theorized. One is because it's good for the economy. It's good for the stock market, and that's good politically, right? Cheaper money means people have cheaper money to invest, which makes everything from stocks to companies go up because companies also have the ability to do research and development for a lower cost. But the main reason that has been theorized is that there's roughly about $9.2 trillion of U.S. national debt. Hi, buddy. I'm not giving her attention, so she's whining. The U.S. national debt that needs to be refinanced or really rolled over this year. And if the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, they might be able to refinance that at a lower interest rate. Come here, love. So that's the main reason that's been theorized. With that said, Jerome Powell has so far refused. So some people have theorized, well, is this politically motivated because the PCE core inflation is actually lower now than when they started? And in my opinion, there's one main difference. So when they started to initially lower the FFR, the federal funds rate, there was no immediate threat of tariffs. Now there are. In fact, tariffs are already in place, and the bulk majority of the much larger tariffs have been paused for 90 days. So we don't even know if those tariffs are actually going to go into effect. We don't know if instead they're going to be modified or canceled. And precisely because of that, the Federal Reserve is in a tricky spot, and Powell is in a tricky spot. Do they cut interest rates now, but then tariffs? And if you look at every major forecaster, they all have tariff inflation baked in. So do they cut interest rates now because PC is lower, but then tariffs might actually cause an increase in inflation? Or do they wait to try to figure out if those tariffs are going to be inflationary? Or are they actually going to be put into effect fully, etc.? And here's the main thing. This is the main reason. What are you doing, dude? You look at me? Here's the main reason. So the most recent jobs report just came out, okay? It blew out of the water expectations. Most analysts were expecting around 135,000 or so jobs to be added. 177,000 jobs were added. So that means that the job market, at least on paper, is strong. And we can argue all day left and right whether those numbers are accurate. But the fact of the matter is the Federal Reserve cares about those numbers. And because they have a dual mandate, remember, they have a dual mandate, maximum employment and price stability. So because of their dual mandate, when the job market looks strong, why would they cut interest rates if it looks like the economy is strong enough to remain in a high interest rate environment, right? So mostly because of that, and mostly because of the threat of tariffs, mostly because of that and the threat of tariffs, they have chosen not to cut interest rates. Now, do I think that that is politically motivated? No, I'll be honest, I don't think Jerome Powell gives an F who's president. I think it could be a Democrat, it could be a Republican. I genuinely do think, and look, I don't agree with everything that the Federal Reserve does. I don't agree with everything that Jerome Powell does. But if you look at their actions, they're as non-political as it can get in this economic, political, hybrid society that we live in. They follow the data. And in fact, they're usually late when it comes to making policy changes, specifically because they follow the data. They have to wait for the unemployment numbers. They have to wait for the job market numbers. They have to wait for CPI reports and PCE reports before actually making any changes. And that is one of the main reasons why, yes, they do lag. They lag when it comes to policy changes because they are data-driven. So, no, I don't think Jerome Powell is politically doing this. I think that anyone could be president, and I genuinely think that it is just the market environment that we're in. So what's the most hilarious to me, and I'll wrap up the video here, is that Donald Trump has called Jerome Powell Mr. Too Slow. He has called him a major loser. The reason for that is because he wants him to cut rates. But the literal reason that rate cuts have been paused is because of Donald Trump's literal own policies. If the tariff threats did not exist, we would probably still be on our way to lower interest rates. There may have already been a cut now. Now, that's not 100% certain, but the chances, the odds of a rate cut at this point would have been much higher than what the CME Watch tool has predicted, which is basically, you should check it out. It's basically predictions on Federal Reserve interest rate changes. It's CME Fed Watch. You can check that out online. But those would have been higher. Those odds would have been higher if tariff and the tariff threats did not exist. So it is hilarious to me, this feud between the president and the chair of the Federal Reserve, and it's mostly a one-way feud, because it's like this created feud, because Trump wants Jerome Powell to cut interest rates, yet it is literally because of President Trump's own policies that we have paused those interest rate cuts. Now, of course, the inflation fight has remained sticky in the 2.5% to 3% range, especially on the CPI metric. But on the PCE metric, yeah, it's moving down. And you would think that there would be rate cuts at this point. That's why people think, hey, maybe this is politically motivated. I don't think it is. It's just the environment that we're in. Trump's literal own policies are the main reason for this, as well as just overall economic uncertainty. GDP was recently negative. I just made a video on that on the main channel, as well as here on the second channel. And the fact of the matter is, while that looks bad, GDP is just a formula, just an identity. It's called the national income identity. And all it is GDP equals C plus I plus S plus exports minus imports. That's consumption plus investment plus spending plus exports minus imports, which is the trade surplus or trade deficit. Because of tariffs, that last section, X minus M, exports minus imports, that increased more than it otherwise would have because there's companies rushing to get product into the country to avoid tariffs. And because of that, we got a negative 0.3% GDP reading. She's eating her own tail over here. You good, dude? You're bored. I have to take her out. I have to take her outside so she can run around, try to chase things, try to eat leaves, all that good stuff. But yeah, I'm going to wrap up the video here. It's Trump's own policies. he blamed the GDP report on Biden, which is hilarious to me because we've had consecutive like 2.5, 3 years of positive GDP growth. And then the first quarter he's in office, it's negative. Now that report wasn't that bad, but I would have preferred him to publicly just explain it. Just say, hey, this is why the report was negative. It's just because people are rushing to get product into the country because of my tariffs. Instead, he blamed it on Biden. Whatever. But now he takes credit for the job market report, which was fantastic, yet he wants Powell to lower interest rates. But Powell's not going to lower interest rates because it's very clear that the job market is doing good in a high interest rate environment, and that's their dual mandate: price stability and maximum employment. So with that said, I hope you found this video informative. If you like this more casual style of talking about finance and economics, you are in the right place. If you want a more structured format, check out the main channel. It's just my name, Derek Polishek, and it's more edited. I put more graphs on the screen, and it's more concise and edited. So if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. It helps the channel out tremendously. And other than that, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.